Would you like a cup of tea?
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, it's David. Today I'm showing you how I built this lovely looking watermill for Cherrybrook. It was going to be a sort of in-depth how-to video, but I realised there was a lot of detail in there that a lot of people probably didn't need or want to see. So I've come back and edited it down very slightly, but you can still follow my progress throughout the process of building this watermill. Started out as a Will's Craftsman kit, which basically just includes several sheets of different types of plasticard and some detailing parts. I've then come along and added various other parts, including the extension at the front here for the shop, made of various other Will's sheeting and some 3D printed parts. This lovely wall down here with some extra stonework, and again a 3D printed fence. Then plenty of painting, weathering, and adding some details, including some model U figures. Overall, I hope you really enjoy this video and follow along as I go through the process of building, painting and weathering the watermill. So let's go back a couple of months to my parents' house when I started making this structure. I decided to start with this side wall here that's going to go onto the high street. Now there was this lovely door included with the kit, and I figured that's probably going to look good as a way for the business to get some of its goods in and out. Obviously the shop front will be here, the sort of bakery extension, so we'll have a nice shop front, then this door here to get some goods in. I'm not too sure at the moment as to whether I want to put windows on this side, or potentially, if I can find where it is, but potentially another door above here, as if things can be craned in and out to this door. Not too sure. I'm going to look at some photos for inspiration. Okay, so I'm losing light in the dining room here, but you can see I've been working on this wall for the watermill here. You can see the major difference is I've cut a hole out at the top to try and put a nice sort of round window in at one end. Obviously it'll only be a half window, as this building is still low relief. So you can see that'll sit around there, up against the back scene. That should look quite nice. I think what I'm going to do next is work on the sort of end of the building at this end, where I'll probably end up having, obviously it'll be a mirror image, but slightly more of a round, if not an entire round window to do. The way I've done this is just, again, cutting the hole based on a round object. I actually used a trumpet mouthpiece. And then that's just milliput there, white milliput, around the edge, and that's mostly dried now. You can see I just scored in some lines across the surface to roughen it up, and I've also put in some nice lines there for the gaps between the stones. You can see I'm quite happy with that end wall. I have realised I've engraved slightly the wrong plank there to create the centre join, but I'm sure I can work that out. And then on the back you can see the reverse, where I've got the various seams and joins and things. And again, you can just see the milliput that's in around the window. A bit rough and ready on the back, but on the front, I hope you'll agree it looks quite nice.
Many hours later.
Okay, so it's the very next day. Very messy table. Please excuse the mess. You can see I did end up making that end wall there. So it's a mirror image of the other side. However, it is slightly longer. So the building is actually on a bit of a diagonal there. You can also see I've started taping up and mocking up the rest of the building. So we've got this major sort of front wall here, which is 4 pieces of plasticard. That one, that one, that one, and that one, all glued together, and it's nice and rigid and strong, ready for me to cut some windows out and some doors out, etc. Got a bit of root just slapdash taped on top there, because it gives the impression of how big this building is going to turn out to be when it's finished. And as you can see down here, I've started making this brick extension, which is going to be for a bakery, or at least for the sort of shop section of a bakery. Now, we've seen several photos of watermills in which they have quite nice brick chimneys, and it gave me some inspiration. I wanted my own sort of brick chimney, and to that end I started designing a chimney to go in here to make quite a nice looking building with a brick chimney. However, that So, went to the model shop and I've bought this Gauge Master industrial chimney. Now the chimney overall is far too large if I was to use all of it. If I can grab some of the pieces here one-handed, it's got a sort of pump house building that goes at the bottom, which I don't think I'm going to use. I'm going to see what I can come up with. I think if I use this full height chimney. Okay, so I've done a lot of work on that main wall there. See, I've fitted various windows. This is just based vaguely off of a couple of photos I've seen of Watermills where there seemed to be no rhyme or reason to where the windows were installed and what size or shape they were. So I've gone for 3 different windows there in sort of roughly first and second, well, ground floor and first floor positions, but not quite. I've also got a drain pipe that covers up the seam between the 2 bits of plasticard. Then this door down here, that's one of the doors from the Craftsman kit, so they do provide sort of pre-moulded doors. However, what I have done is create my own door frame by cutting up some plasticard strips and sending that around. Create some stairs with some sheet plasticard and a bit of this stonework. The reason it's raised up is because there will be some sort of brick sheeting or cobblestone sheeting on the floor in the courtyard area. And then also I've got these sort of roundel things here, as if the building, it's when they sort of drive rods through the building to hold it together and stop it subsiding. And I thought it looked quite good. Okay, apologies for the mess and the background noise, and for the fact I've skipped so far ahead. I could have sworn that I'd filmed a clip in between the last clip and this one, but apparently not. So last time you saw me, I'd just made up this front wall here, and I was going to combine it with the other stone walls and put the roof on, and then I was going to move on to this brick section here. And as you can see, I've done that already. So yeah, literally just glued together the walls. You can see I've sprayed the inside black, but you can see just a lot of hot glue holding it together really, and some sheet plasticard. So that's just a sheet of plain plasticard that again I've spray painted black just to cover up a lot of the stuff inside, and also if I fit some LEDs in the future it won't look weird without an interior. I could always fit an interior to this, I'm not too sure at the moment. But again, 3 walls together, roof on. There is this tiny section of roof here, which was a little annoying to cut, because obviously the building is not completely straight. This will be where the back scene is, so I needed just a little bit of roof on the other side. That's not looking too bad. The next stage then was to sort of keep working on this brick section. So I'd already cut this wall out before. I don't know if I'd shown you that. There's a massive hole here for what will be the shop frontage. Then just 2 windows in the top as if there's someone living above there. And there's room in the middle for maybe a sign or something, I'm not too sure. Simple end gable wall here. And I've just fitted a chimney breast on, that's just 1 sheet of plasticard thick. And on the back here, we've got a door, a couple of random windows. Again, I'm really inspired by a Watermill I saw just on Google, where it had just windows everywhere. They seem completely sporadic and random, and I just think it looks quite cool. And then I've just made up this sort of square of the stone plasticard to support the bottom of the chimney, and that's just let into the roof here, just to combine it all together. And we've got the nice Gauge Master chimney, just the top section there, because the full chimney itself, if I was to combine it with, if I can get it, if I had this bit on the bottom as well, it would have been far too tall. That would have looked just a bit too much for a Watermill. But no, and then the next stage, I've just glued this roof on. Slightly different tiling on this roof, just to sort of mix things up a little bit. And now I'm going to continue with my final processes before I get some primer on. So the first stage will be for this roof here. I need to flatten out the top, and the way I'm going to do that is literally just by coming along with the sander like this. And just doing that. And just flattening out the ridgeline there. And that will then allow me to take some of the roofing stones off this sheet, probably those round ones, will look quite nice, and run that down the middle of the roof there. I'm then going to create flashing, which is something I've done for my previous buildings, and people seem to like when I've shared photographs online. And the way I do that is just by cutting some masking tape to size, and putting it along all the seams that are relevant or need it, and then literally coming back with super glue and soaking it in super glue to make it nice and firm. Okay, so to make up for the fact I've missed a whole lot of assembling this building, because I thought I'd filmed it, but I hadn't, I'm just showing you a bit of an update here. I've sanded down that roof ridge, so this bit of ridge tile should fit. It's a snug fit, if I can get it into place with one hand. There we go. That fits very snugly in there. It would, of course, be straight when I glue it in. There we go. And then I've just started doing the flashing. So as I said, literally just cut a strip of masking tape, lay it in. And then what I like to do, I don't know if it's correct or not, but I think it looks nice, is cut along the masking tape in sort of staggered zigzag line where it lines up with the block work. I think that looks quite effective. So I just need to do the same thing on this little gap around here, around the chimney, and then seal in this chimney breast here as well. And then it will be onto the gutters and those sort of things before I can paint it. Hoping to get it painted before I go out to the pub this afternoon. Okay, so you join me just before I'm going to add some primer. And you can see I finished adding the ridge tiles. I've soaked the flashing there in glue, so that's firmed up now. I've added guttering along the top there. Also on the bakery, on the front I've added guttering. I've added arch boards on the end. Yeah, I think that's what they're called, not sure. There's all of the roofs there. So I think it's now ready for a bit of spray primer. Any cheap primer will do. And that'll be time to start painting. So I've just masked off most of the brick areas and the slate areas, just so it'll be easier to paint them later on. As you can see, I've primed the building completely grey, and in fairness, I can paint over any sort of overspray that I do get, but it's just the more layers of paint you get on these details, the less, I don't know, detailed it'll look. So, okay, I'm going to get on with it and start spraying. I'm not really going to film too much while spraying, because this is what the spray booth sounds like. It's quite noisy, so I'll do some spraying and come back to you. You'll have to excuse the extractor fan, but I've just been spotting on various colours on various different stones, and I'm now going to give it a light misting of dark earth, just a really light misting, in almost like a sort of leopard print style. Hard to explain it, but it does work. And then I'm going to be coming along with some black washes to try and get the stonework all sort of unified and looking good. We can carry on. Okay, so I have given it a very light dusting of that earth colour, but I've decided I'm not going to come back and do the sort of hand brushing and weathering in until I've done the rest of the airbrushing. Figure I'll get the airbrushing out of the way, and then I can focus on the brush painting afterwards. Okay, so I've just sprayed all of the brickwork there started off, where was it? Started off with a Vallejo rust colour, but then I've come back and I've been using a sponge, which you can see down there in the mess of paints and things. Various reds, oranges, browns, sponging all over, wiping it off again. And you can see we've got quite an effective-ish brick colour. I say effective-ish because the best way to get it to work even better is to follow up with some black washes. That should bring it all together. Okay, so I'm back at home, and I've brought, obviously, the building back with me from my parents' house. I think it's exactly how you last saw it off the top of my head. The only thing I might have done, I can't remember if I've shown you this, I've neatened up some of the edges of this stonework, and then also I've given it a couple of coats of matte varnish as well. My intention for today is to start working on the stonework, weathering it down. So I tend to just use a lot of black wash. This is Panel Line Accent Colour Black. It's just a really thin black wash. Hopefully I've got enough of that left. I've also got, if I don't drop it, in here I've got some Sleeper Grime, which is really thinned down, and I use that as a wash sometimes as well. And then also I can use any of my acrylic colours. If I just pan the camera around very slightly, any of those, and I can mix it with either this, which is IPA that I bought at Ali Pali, or I can mix it just with some water, in fact, and create some various black and brown washes just to go over the stonework and make it all blend together. Okay, so I've basically just got a layer of black wash on most of the areas. Some of this brown wash in lower parts as well, but you can see what a massive difference it's made. Just for example, I've not done one of the sides, so that's what it looks like sort of after the black wash. And this is what it did look like before. So you can see a huge difference. If I do some live in front of you right now, just dip it in, you can see it really sort of brings these stones to life. It just shows how good the wheel's actual moulding is itself. The fact that this black wash settles into all of the little nooks and crannies in the stonework and creates this lovely, lovely texture. So I'm going to keep going with this black wash everywhere. I'm just trying to do this whilst talking. Like so. And what I have been doing is a little bit of my brown wash, my homemade brown wash, on some of these lower stones, just to bring those out. Keep going with that, just finish off the rest of this building. You see I've got this side to do here, and this brickwork, and this bit of roof. And once I've got my washes on, I'll let them dry for a bit, and then it will be time to come back and paint all the doors, windows, gutters, and things like that. Okay, so the first bit of tedious painting is done, and that is the doors in a nice blue colour. I've done the barge boards as well, the roof sort of trimmings as well. I don't know why I went with blue, but I think it looks quite nice actually like that. The next thing to do then is the window frames, which I was going to do in a dark colour, but I've just gone and plonked the building on the layout, and it's looking a little bit darker compared to my other buildings that are already on there, so I will be coming back and doing a whole load of weathering shortly when I get round to it. But for now, I think I'll be painting the window frames in a white, sort of just traditional white colour, and then all the gutters, and you can see the trims going up the chimney need to go into a black colour. So apologies if I'm not going to film too much of this, but it really is almost a meditative process. You need a really small brush, steady hand, sit and watch some TV, and paint on the fine lines. Okay, so it is in fact the next day. The lighting's not the best here at my desk, but it's good for working and not so good for filming. And you can see I got all of the painting done. So throughout yesterday, I did various coats. So I've got all the white paint on the window frames, black paint on all the gutters, blue for the doors with black on the hinges. You can see I've also done some rust weathering on those hinges there. We've got the black bands on the chimney, and again windows and gutters and things on the back. Then I've done a lot more weathering as well. So I've come along with various weathering powders and washes, and just toned everything down, blended it all in together. And I'm quite happy with how it's come out. I did come back and put, it's actually a rust oil brusher across some of the brickwork. And I did, in some places, put a bit of a white wash. I tend to try and avoid having a white wash on my brickwork, because I think the whitewash can be too much in 00 scale. So that, for example, there's none on the chimney at all whatsoever. However, there is bits of it on the side of the bakery. Now, moving on to the bakery, I spent this morning doing some 3D CAD. I spent most of the day doing some printing, and third time's the charm, having changed my settings several times, I've got the shop front here. Now, in just a moment, I'll be showing you how I prepare this and prime it, and that will hopefully fit snugly into the front there, if I've measured it correctly. Hopefully that will fit. The other thing I've done as well is this is just in a primer coat, well, actually a Rail Match Sleeper Grime coat. I purchased this 3D model of a water wheel, downloaded it and 3D printed it, and that's going to go, instead of the Will's wheel, that'll go on this side here. So what I'm going to do now is I will be painting this water wheel. I don't think I'm going to do that today. I think I might be buying some new paints before I paint that. There's a few effects I want to try. So I'm going to try and prise this off of its support material, get it primed, get it painted, and installed in the front of the shop. Okay, so it's the next day, and I've got ahead of myself here. I've done a lot of painting this morning. I didn't film anything really, because I was trying to be nice and quiet, because my girlfriend was still in bed in the room next door. But you can see I'm quite happy with how that's come out. So it says Newton & Sons Millers for the nice flour mill, Watermill. Those windows, I did just glue in the frames back into place. So we've got these replacement parts on either side, like so. And also, if I just use a paintbrush here to point out, that is a replacement piece, just that one bar there, as is that bar there. And then I took the bars out of the windows just because they were so fine, they'd become damaged when I was extracting it from the support material, but I think it looks just fine without. I've gone for a blue colour, a spray blue, followed by a lot of dry brushing with lighter shades of blue. And I used those just sort of mixed up on this bit of card here and dry brushed various layers. And then I've also come along with my favourite thing, a Tamiya panel line wash, just to darken up some of the areas there. The text itself then is in Vallejo brass, and I literally just did that with a really fine brush. Now hopefully I can show you this whole process again, because I will be printing another sign to go just above here. Okay, so apologies for not screen recording, but this was way quicker to set up than turning on screen recording on my computer. You can see I've got that's the design for the mill. You can see all the intricate detail that ended up adding. Not all of it's come out, obviously, on the 3D print, but that's just the front of the bakery. But then I've just been designing up here this little sign. I've got bakery, established 1863, and a little logo here. And you can see here's the vector I've got, loaded it into Fusion 360, and I've developed this little sign. Now the key here that worked well with painting the shop sign is having this text 0.15 millimeters sort of protruding from the surface. So I've done that with the text and the logo. I'm now going to 3D print it. Okay, so I've got the files on a USB stick. I'll just plug that in. Turn on my LED Mars 3 Pro. Other printers are available. Hit print. That's going to take about 8 minutes. Okay, so you joined me in the office in the evening. I've given that a prime earlier on, and now it's time to give it a paint. So that text, as I said, is 0.15 millimeters, sort of raised above the surface. If it's not high enough, I can change it if I can't quite get it to work. Now we're going to continue and dry brush this, then come back with some gold paint. So what I'm going to be using is, again, this mix of Vallejo colours here. And I'm just going to mix up a similar blue to the shop front. It's mostly guesswork. Give that a mix up. Okay, so I got it painted. You might, however, notice it's a completely different sign. I was working with this sign here. You can see the text really wasn't raised too much on it, and also it's a slightly different shape. I went back into my design, massively increased, well, not massively, increased the depth to 0.2 millimeters on the text. Also printed this at an angle, because I found out that actually nothing was coming out, well, not nothing, but the text really wasn't printing properly, printing it flat on the bed, and having it raised up on support material for some reason made it print much better. Okay, so it's the next day and you join me on the layout. I'm not sure if I've shown you the building in place on the layout yet, but it's looking rather good. I've got my MBR trees just slotted into place temporarily, as I've been trying to just work out where they need to go. And no, the scene as a whole is looking quite nice. You can see you've got the shop front glued in last night, just with some super glue, and that's looking quite good. I've got on the printer at the moment some shelves to go in the shop windows if I just rotate this round. It's probably a bit extra, but behind the windows here I want to put some sort of shelves, maybe with something resembling some sort of loaves of bread and that sort of thing. And then I can light it up and hopefully it should look quite nice. But I think what I'm going to work on for this afternoon is starting to think about integrating the water wheel. So I've got this water wheel that I 3D printed. Again, purchased this online and then printed it. And I think it should sit somewhere around here. Haven't quite worked it out yet. Something like that, maybe. Where it's feeding just into the edge of the watermill. Now that does mean the water level, of course, needs to be all the way up here and then have a couple of weirs going down. I can of course mount it lower like so, but then I need some sort of extension on the wall to the building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start cutting some sheet to size. So I've got one more sheet of this type of stonework that's on the chimney and on the lower half of the walls here, and I'll cut that to fit in there, I think. And then I've got some other stonework. This is some random stone that I'm going to cut to fit as a sort of retaining wall on either side, like so. Then I need to work out what goes on in this area here. Okay, so I've done a load of painting on these sheets here. Just used a similar technique that I've used before, where I've built up various colours and then come back along and used a very dark wash to fill in, and it looks quite nice. Something else I've done, sorry, whilst I've got this here, is I've also just glued on some green flock onto the bottom, roughly where the water line is going to go. That's some Woodland Scenics fine turf. I've also made up, if I pull everything apart back here, this dividing piece is a nice bit of foam board with some plasticard on either side, some of the Will's stone plasticard. And again, I've painted and weathered that in a similar way to my other techniques. And then finally, those sluice gates, I've actually painted up and weathered with a lot of, it started with a black layer, then a layer of sort of rusty browny colours, dry brushing. Then I've come along with some green washes and also some green weathering powder to produce some nice moss and algae effects. And by the time they're at the back there, I think that'll look really quite effective. Okay, so I'm getting to the end of the building itself, and it's time to start thinking about adding glazing. Now, I could simply cut out some thin, clear plastic. The packaging of Will's kits is normally pretty good for this, and that's what they intend it for. However, what I think I'm going to do, if it goes horribly wrong, I'll do something else, but I've used before micro Kristal Klear from Microscale to actually make the window panes themselves. So you can use micro Kristal Klear to glue in clear plastic, and that's what I will be doing for some of the windows. I don't think I'll use this method on all of them. However, what you can also do, and it can be quite tedious, so I don't know if I'm going to film it, is just dip a paintbrush or a cocktail stick in, run it around the edge of each individual panel, and use the surface tension to form glazing in those holes there. Okay, so it seems to be working so far, touch wood, and all I've been doing is getting a paintbrush, dipping it in, getting a reasonable amount on. It's going to be quite hard one-handed. And then I pick a pane, I'm just going to go for the middle one here. You go around all four edges into the corners, and then work your way in, getting smaller and smaller with your circles. Just trying to drag the surface tension. And there we go. No idea if I managed to film that, but that is another pane done. Okay, so it's the next day, and you can see those windows have dried quite nicely. It leads to all sorts of lovely little reflections. It's a very stylised look that I think is suitable for this kind of really old shop frontage, however probably not so suitable for more modern buildings. I've also come along and done all of the windows on the mill, except for these round ones at either end where I still need to 3D print a frame to go in there. But once I've printed a frame, which I might do this evening, I'll get some glazing in there as well. You might also notice, inside the shop, I've actually installed some shelves in the windows. And in those shelves, or on those shelves I should say, are some little loaves of bread made out of milliput. Now I'm hoping this should look quite good when lit up, and the way I'm going to do that, I've been working behind the scenes to create. Here is my mock-up shop. The door looks horrendous. I think I might repaint that door quickly. But you can see we've just got this really rough brown floor, blue and white walls, blue door, an LED in there to light it up. And I'm hoping when that's behind that sort of glossy window and behind those shells, you really won't be able to see this at all, to be honest. But it will just give an impression. And the human brain is really good at filling in the gaps. So with just this amount of detail, that 3D desk there and that brown splodge on the wall representing a shelf, I'm hoping from a distance you'll catch a glimpse of the inside and think it looks really realistic. Okay, so I got that section of card construction glued in there, and it's got the LED in place. I've actually just painted that LED yellow because I did one of my test fits and it looked quite white. That feeds back then into the Gauge Master control board. So that comes with the little pack of lamps, and I've got a lamp glued in place there. That's actually a green lamp that I've painted black, and I bought that at Gagemaster themselves in Ford, and they've got a little bargain bin, and I think it was £4 for a set of lamps, that control board, and a load of yellow LEDs. It comes in a sort of lighting kit pack. So yeah, it's now time to sort of start installing this. Something I've realised that you've seen in the background now, and I've not actually shown you properly, is the little yard in the back. Now, I was working on this at a friend's house. Quite often I go over to one of my old uni mates' houses to do a bit of modelling. He's into Warhammer, so we do some painting and also a lot of gaming, play an awful lot of Battlefield 1 together. But no, whilst he was painting up some Warhammer, I actually worked on painting these Model U figures. So we've got a nice guy holding his cup of tea there, and he's obviously the manager supervising this chap here, who's cleaning up a spill of flour. Now, I might come back and just add some more white to that flour, just brighten it up a little bit. I'm not too sure, but I think it's a nice little cameo scene there. The floor itself is made of the Will's brick plasticard, the exact same brick plasticard I used to build this building here. And then I've just painted and weathered that, and I think that looks quite effective as a little courtyard. I did actually have, back at my old house, a courtyard made of bricks like that, so it is something that was done, laying some spare bricks down on the floor, like so. And then I've got these little sacks built up in the corner there. Those are 3D printed, painted and weathered, and they sit in the corner. Okay, so we're jumping ahead very slightly now. I was sort of filming this as I went along, but as I got towards the end of the filming, I really lost my mojo to get this video finished. I moved on to other projects, if you couldn't tell, by the high street, which has been progressing nicely over there. So yeah, I skipped a few bits of filming. I made this courtyard. I'm pretty sure I've shown you that. I've then built up this wall out of the Will's walling kit. The fence is just 3D printed to my own design. It actually matches the design of a fence that I've done down here, but you'll see that in a separate video. Then I've come along and added all sorts of foliage. So I've got some woodland scenics, fine leaf foliage, just in the corners there, and then coming up the side of the bakery there. I've also got some MBR foliage and plants just there in the corner. And I think it looks really rather nice. I did, of course, also make a start on this walling down here, which you can see is currently loose, but I'm going to leave that for a future video. I don't want to start gluing this wall into place until I know what I'm doing down here and how much access is required. There's a very slim chance I'm going to have to cut this bridge out in order to put the water and things in and then reassemble everything. So I'll leave that until a later date. Talking of future videos, you'll notice the water wheel isn't in place. I've got some plans to possibly motorise that. It's a slight gimmick, but I'd like to be able to push a button and have the water wheel spin for a sort of set period and then stop again as well. Looking to the future then, and I do have a video planned on the development of the high street. Still plenty of work to be done, however it is making progress now. I started making this on New Year's Day, I think it was, and we're now coming towards the end of June. It's had probably 3 or 4 repaints for the road surface, and I think I'm finally happy with it. And just recently, I fitted a load of detail in this area down here, and started this statue area with the foliage. I've also painted up the wall, and you'll see all of that in possibly, or well, most likely, the next video. After that video on the high street, I think there'll be more of a generic layout update. There's a few things I've been up to, including starting to make the platforms, which I don't think warrant a video in themselves. There's so many how-to guides on making platforms, and it will enable me to get some stuff done behind the scenes and then just lump it into one layout update video. The sort of video people used to make on model railways before everyone started doing how-tos, which I think was pointed out on the Model Rail Replacement podcast recently. Everyone started filming everything they're up to, which is quite labour-intensive on the filming, which I will try and keep doing. There's a few things, though, I do want to keep off camera. These platforms are going to be a bit of a nightmare for me to finish. I've also got a signal box kit that I've been doing in my sort of spare time, my evenings after work. Not been filming that, that's just been quite relaxing. But I plan to keep you in the loop with all these projects, with a general layout update coming after my video on the high street. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video and the development of the Watermill, and I hope to see you again soon.